A little girl stopped a powerful man with just 5 words. "Help me, my mommy is sick." What happened next shocked him, and changed their lives forever. But when the truth of his past was revealed, the real question became, would he save them or run again? Watch till the end, because the twist will leave you speechless. A cold wind swept through the city streets. The evening lights flickered on, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. People hurried past, faces buried in scarves, avoiding eye contact. In the middle of the crowded sidewalk, a little girl stood still. Her dress was torn, her shoes mismatched, and her eyes filled with fear. She tugged on the sleeve of a tall man in a black coat. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Help me, my mommy is sick." The man turned sharply. He was the director of the theater nearby, known for his cold stare and strict rules. For a moment, he looked down at her with irritation. But then, something in her eyes made his chest tighten. He followed as she led him through narrow, damp alleys. The smell of rot and damp stone grew stronger with every step. His polished shoes splashed into muddy puddles, soaking through the leather. They stopped at a rusty door with peeling paint. The girl pushed it open, and a wave of stale air rushed out. Inside, the room was dark, lit only by a single flickering candle. On the bed lay a woman, her skin pale, her breath shallow. The director froze. He had seen poverty before, but never so close. The girl knelt beside her mother, clutching her thin hand. Her whisper cut through the silence. She said, "You would come." The director's heart pounded in his chest. How did she know his name? The mother opened her eyes, weak but aware. Her lips moved slowly, forming words he could barely hear. "You promised me, years ago." The candle flickered, shadows stretching across the walls. The director stepped back, his face pale. He remembered. And it terrified him. The memory surged through his mind like a storm. He was younger then, reckless, chasing dreams with no regard for promises. A woman in despair had begged him for help, her voice trembling, her hands gripping his arm. He had sworn to return, sworn to save her when he found success. But he never returned. Now she lay before him, broken by years of struggle, her child staring at him with desperate hope. The girl's eyes glistened, wide and unblinking. "Will you save her now?" she asked, her voice sharp with both innocence and demand. The room felt smaller, suffocating. The walls seemed to close in, damp and stained with mold. The director's hands trembled. The woman coughed, the sound dry and rasping, pulling him closer. Her gaze pierced him, heavy with both blame and pleading. "You left me," she whispered, tears streaking her hollow cheeks. The little girl clutched his coat sleeve tighter. "You promised," she repeated, louder this time, her voice echoing in the silence. The director's heart pounded, each beat heavier than the last. He had built his empire on talent and charm, yet here he stood powerless. The flickering candle bent lower, threatening to extinguish. And for the first time in years, he felt the weight of guilt he could no longer hide. The little girl's voice cut through the dark once more. "If you do not help, she will die tonight." The words struck him like a blade. The girl's voice was not a cry anymore. It was a command. The director staggered forward, his breath uneven. He reached the bedside, his shadow falling over the sick woman. Her frail chest rose and fell in shallow waves. Her hand lifted weakly, brushing against his wrist. The touch burned, as if reminding him of the life he abandoned. He looked into her sunken eyes. They were not empty. They were filled with recognition, pain, and something else, expectation. The girl's grip tightened on his sleeve, nails pressing into the fabric. Her gaze was fierce, unyielding. "You can help," she said, her words steady now. The room seemed to hold its breath. The candle hissed, wax dripping onto the table. The director's pulse thundered in his ears. He wanted to run. He wanted to escape this place of shadows and accusations. But his legs refused to move. The woman coughed again, a violent shudder racking her body. The girl cried out, clutching her mother's hand. Her small shoulders shook, but her eyes never left him. "You owe her," she whispered, almost like a verdict. The director closed his eyes, and the truth pressed down on him like chains. He did owe her. And the debt was long overdue. His throat tightened, the air heavy as if the room itself demanded his answer. He knelt by the bed, his knees pressing against the damp floorboards. The woman's fragile fingers clung to his wrist, her breath rattling like broken glass. The girl's face hovered close, eyes wide, waiting. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. For years he had commanded crowds, filled theaters with his voice, yet now he could not form a single word. The silence stretched, unbearable. Finally, he whispered, "I will not leave you again." The girl's eyes glistened, a mixture of disbelief and hope. But the woman shook her head weakly. Her lips moved, forcing out a faint, jagged breath. "It is too late, for me." The director's chest tightened, panic flooding through him. "No," he said, his voice breaking, "you cannot say that." The girl pressed her cheek against her mother's hand. Her small voice trembled. "Then save me. Do not let me end like her." The candle guttered, its flame shrinking, shadows devouring the corners of the room. The director felt his world tilt. He realized the choice before him was no longer about the past. It was about the little girl staring at him with unrelenting eyes. Her future, or her ruin, rested entirely in his hands. The director's breath came sharp and uneven, as if the very air fought against his lungs. The girl's words coiled around him, sinking deep into his chest. Her gaze was not a child's gaze anymore. It was piercing, relentless, demanding an answer he could not escape. He reached for her hand. It was small, trembling, but her grip was strong, almost desperate. In that grip, he felt both her fear and her strength. The mother's breathing grew thinner, each inhale a painful struggle. Her lips moved again, barely audible. "Promise me, promise her." The director leaned closer, his face pale, his jaw clenched. "I promise," he whispered, the words tasting like iron on his tongue. The girl's eyes shone, not with joy, but with a strange, guarded relief. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, fading into the night. The candle snapped, its flame stretching, then steadying, as though it refused to die. The director looked around the crumbling room, the cracked walls, the broken window, the sagging roof. It felt like a coffin, swallowing them whole. His heart pounded harder. If he walked away now, she would be lost forever. If he stayed, everything he had built could collapse. The girl's voice cut through his thoughts once more. "You must choose now." The words echoed like a verdict in his skull. "You must choose now." The girl's stare burned into him, harder than any spotlight he had ever stood under. He swallowed, his throat dry as ash. The woman's chest heaved, her breath shallow, each one more fragile than the last. He could hear the faint crack of the wood under his knees, the dripping of water in the corner, the cruel ticking of time slipping away. The director's hand trembled as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. He thought of his glittering stage, the roaring applause, the power of his name carved into posters. None of it mattered here. Here he was only a man who had broken a promise. The girl leaned closer, her voice cold for someone so young. "If you walk away again, I will never forgive you." Her words were sharp, final, like a blade pressed against his throat. The mother's eyes fluttered open once more, searching his face with a look that mixed sorrow and faint hope. The candle wavered. Its flame stretched long and thin, casting twisted shadows across the damp walls. The director's breath hitched. At that moment, he knew. He could not run. Not again. Slowly, with a resolve that shook his body, he whispered, "Then I choose you." The girl's grip tightened, but her expression did not soften. Instead, she asked in a quiet, steady voice. "Will you prove it?" The question struck him harder than the promise itself. "Will you prove it?" The girl's eyes glimmered, unblinking, sharp as glass in the candlelight. The director's mouth opened, but no words formed. Promises were easy, proof was not. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, louder than the dripping water in the corner, louder than the woman's shallow breaths. He looked at the frail figure on the bed, her lips moving silently, her hand still clutching her daughter's fingers. The girl did not look at her mother anymore. Her gaze was fixed entirely on him, as though she already knew her fate. The air grew heavier, pressing down on his shoulders. He forced his voice out, rough and low. "Yes," he said. But the girl tilted her head, her stare unshaken. "Words again," she whispered. Her grip on his sleeve tightened, the fabric pulling under her small fingers. "Show me." The candle flame flared, stretching tall as if stirred by something unseen. The director felt the room tilt, as if the shadows themselves leaned closer, waiting. His chest tightened, his jaw locked. This was no longer a plea. It was a trial. And the little girl was his judge. His breath quickened, shallow and uneven. The girl's demand echoed in his skull. "Show me." The director's eyes darted around the room, the cracked plaster, the broken chair, the empty cupboard. There was nothing here but decay, and yet everything here carried the weight of his past betrayal. He rose slowly to his feet, towering over the child and her fading mother. His hands clenched at his sides, nails digging into his palms until they ached. The girl never flinched. Her gaze followed him, sharp and unrelenting, as though she were certain he had nowhere to run. The mother's chest rattled, a hollow sound that made the silence heavier. He stepped back toward the door, his shadow stretching across the floor. The girl's voice cut through him again, sharper than before. "If you leave, she will die, and I will never forgive you." Her words pinned him in place like chains. He turned, the doorframe cold under his fingertips. His reflection glinted faintly in the cracked glass by the wall. For the first time in years, he did not see the proud director, the man who commanded stages. He saw a coward, trembling in the dark. The girl's hand slipped into her mother's, her voice soft but final. "This is the moment. Choose." The candle sputtered, throwing wild shadows across the room, as if the walls themselves leaned in to witness his answer. His chest heaved, each breath heavier than the last. The words clung to him, "This is the moment. Choose." The candle hissed, spitting wax, as if the flame itself hung on his decision. The director's hand slid from the doorframe, trembling. He turned back, his eyes locked on the girl. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt, but her expression carried the weight of someone far older than her years. The woman on the bed groaned, her body twisting weakly, her voice a rasp of pain. The sound pierced him. His legs carried him forward before his mind could resist. He dropped to his knees again, this time not in hesitation, but in surrender. The girl leaned closer, her breath shallow, her words steady. "Then prove it with action, not with air." Her hand released his sleeve at last, falling gently to her side. The director bowed his head, his voice breaking. "I will bring her help. I will not run this time." The girl studied him in silence, her eyes flickering like the flame, searching for cracks in his resolve. Outside, the faint rumble of a carriage and the echo of hurried footsteps passed in the street. Time was slipping. The director stood again, his figure casting a long shadow across the frail woman. He reached for his coat, his voice low but firm. "If I fail tonight, it will not be her death alone. It will be mine too." The girl's lips parted, but no words came. She only watched him, her small fingers still tangled with her mother's hand. The director pulled the door wide, and the cold night air rushed in, carrying the distant hum of life beyond these forgotten walls. For the first time in years, his steps were not toward applause or glory, but toward redemption. He vanished into the dark street, his figure swallowed by shadows. Moments later, the faint glow of lanterns appeared outside. Hurried voices followed, doctors, summoned at last, their hands carrying hope. The girl pressed her cheek against her mother's arm, whispering, "He kept his promise." Her mother's lips curved faintly, as if in peace, before her eyes closed in exhausted rest. The candle burned steady now, its flame calm, its shadows no longer restless. The girl looked at the door, where the director had stood trembling moments ago. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe. The past had broken them. But the choice he made tonight would change everything.